We've all heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, but the thing that we often forget is that it also takes one to support the mother.
Well, speaking of the village, this is our podcast. I'm Nicole Harlow.
And I'm Dawn Thompson, and we're here to connect you with a village of support you need from pregnancy to parenting.
So come on this journey with us as we build your village one episode at a time. All right. Hello. I am Nicole Harlow and joined by my awesome co-host, Dawn Thompson. And we are here today with Tracy Donegan. She is a wife, a doula, and founder of the GentleBirth app, which I can personally say is amazing because I used it with my first, and I'm pretty sure all the other ones as well, but found it with my first birth and really helped me along that pregnancy journey. So Tracy, can you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. Always delighted to chat about all things birth and parenting and motherhood. So I guess I'm a midwife by trade. I originally trained as a birth doula I was out in Singapore at the time. Kind of got bitten by the bug out there and started doing some doula training myself and came back to Ireland and started Ireland's first doula service. Then decided, well, I've gotten so far in doula work and looking at the evidence and having conversations with midwives, I was like, well, there's very little evidence-based care that women are getting. So I thought, well, let's go back to school and do midwifery so I can give women evidence-based care. And then it kind of continued from there. So I went back to school, got my midwifery degree, I'd been teaching hypnobirthing, traditional hypnobirthing for a while, and then was kind of looking at incorporating more kind of brain training tools into mental preparation for birth, and kind of GentleBirth was born out of that. That was 2006. So it's been a minute. And I am now back in the US, living in Texas. So we've kind of traveled around a bit, and please, we would like to stay in Texas for for the foreseeable future. I don't really plan on packing bags anytime soon, or boxes. And I've got 2 boys, 2 dogs, and 1 husband who is around here somewhere.
Nice. Well, talk to us about like that. You know, a lot of women don't understand how critically important mindset is during that pregnancy part, and especially when it comes to their birth. So, what are some of the things that or let's start with the reason why it's so important?
I think most of the times we don't realize that, everything that goes on up here doesn't stay in our brain. So like thoughts that we have will create corresponding biochemical responses in the body. So if we start to pay attention to our thoughts a little bit, and this is not about, becoming the thought police or trying to control your mind to that extent. It's about just noticing what your mind does when you're not watching, really. So before anyone talks about mindfulness, I'm like, just like a couple of times a day, just notice the way you speak to yourself and how you feel when you speak to yourself, because most of us are not speaking to ourselves in a way that would be nurturing or compassionate. And I would say a lot of us have grown up with that idea that, being compassionate to yourself or kind to yourself is a weakness. Especially as women, it's like we're supposed to just, grin and bear it, you crack on and you don't complain, but when we realize that those thoughts, they become part of our physiology, it just makes sense that we start to notice what we're doing up here. And I call it the becoming the nosy neighbor of your mind. So you're just like the nosy neighbor that might be, peeking out the curtains, watching what's going on, all the activity out in the street. We're just kind of looking behind the screens a little bit and just noticing and just being very accepting of what we find. Because sometimes when we shine that spotlight in the dark recesses of our mind, we can find some stuff that is not so compassionate. And it's just noticing that we all have these patterns of thought. Most of the time, we're just not even aware of it. But when you start to pay attention, then and you have that awareness, then you can do something about it. Because just the idea of, and this hit me really hard when I heard this, I think it was about shame, the emotion of shame, which of course is a huge deal for new moms, and adjusting to, you know, that your new body image. And but it was a study that said, like, when we experience feelings of shame and that negative self-talk, and the body is responding as if it was a physical attack on ourselves. So if you've ever, I guess, had any kind of unnerving interaction in public, like, you know, and somebody says something to you that's unnerving, you know how your body is responding. But then, you know, if you're saying it to yourself, it's like, wow, we're like, this is time to kind of pay attention to this, because we want our babies marinating in oxytocin and endorphins and instead of stress hormones. But half the time we don't even realize that we're generating our own stress hormones, not from what's going on outside, but from what we're doing up here. And we do have control over that.
I like to think about this from Ina May Gaskin talks about the mental piece in her book, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. That book absolutely changed my life from just an understanding of exactly what you're talking about it's not just about the physiological process, but it's also about the emotional piece that happens. And it's so interesting. I think about this all the time. It's like, if another mammal, say a deer, is out in the wild and they are ready to give birth, labor can literally stop. They can literally stop labor if there is a threat nearby, or even if it's a perceived threat, even if they're just nervous or scared, they can stop labor, get up and run away. And we're no different than that. And it's amazing how often people go into that hospital environment and they're scared and they're nervous and they don't know the people that are coming into their room, right? It takes time for them to feel safe and relaxed. And guess what? If you don't, your cervix is not going to open. It's not going to dilate. Labor might stop. You know, labor might slow down. I mean, there's just so many things that play into that piece. And I think it's why, for me, and in my mind, it's so critically important to be comfortable and to be prepared and to understand what might be coming your way and really get into the details of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially within the hospital environment, because it's, even though cognitively, you know, okay, I have chosen this hospital for most moms, they've chosen this hospital. I really like my OB. Hope I have a nice nurse. But you're going into an environment that is alien to mammals. You got the bright lights, strangers, like everything you don't like. It's, I joke about it. It's like, do you think you could honestly go into, you know, I don't know, what a big train station, Penn Station in New York? Is there a big train, like, and labor with all of that going on around you? Now, it's not exactly the same, but your nervous system is acting as if, yeah, this labor and delivery, which is all very nice, has nice pictures on the wall and, you know, dim lighting, but my nervous system is saying, no, this is not a safe place to give birth because of all of this other environmental input. But Dawn, just back to your piece on, you know, the mammals on the plane, like, so what we do as the one big, you know, different, and Michelle O'Donnell, I know, is always talking about this, the fact that we have these big brains, you know, that impacts our birth. So what we do is, so if, you know, the mammal, you know, let's just say the zebra is out on the plane and, you know, there's a lion off in the distance, and even if they're laboring, they're moving, they've got to get away from this threat. And as humans, what we do is, we will escape from the threat, but then we will replay that threat for another 6 hours, thinking, I just escaped, I just got away from the line, and we will replay it and replay it. And that's what we do. And then we're just, you know, we're prolonging that stress response because we're not paying attention. It's like, okay, well, I want to be marinating my baby in oxytocin, not stress hormones. So I think there's a probably better use of my attention right now, and having it over here on things that are, upsetting to me or stressful doesn't make sense. So let me make a decision to redirect my attention and put it somewhere else.
So that's a great thing. Like, let's talk about that. What does somebody do? What is the first thing they do if they found themselves, say a couple has found themselves having an argument, right? And there's a lot of stress hormones going on. People are upset. What can somebody do in those moments to like make a switch?
Well, it would depend on the topic, wouldn't it? No, I'm joking. It would, something I think always get out of your head and get into your body. So if you can find a way to connect with your body just by, first of all, you have to notice that we're both getting a little amped up here, and one of us has to be the adult in the room and kind of, let's bring the energy down a little bit. So just connecting in with your breath. And just because I think when the mind has gone off the rails, literally into that fight or flight response, our executive functioning is offline. So it is very hard to just decide not to be angry. We have to really, kind of bring ourselves down. And what I find helpful is to connect in with the breath, or even like something even more simple. Like I use my feet a lot. So it's like, where are my feet? So once I ask that question, where are my feet? I'm already out of my head. I'm out of that spiral and that argument. And I've moved my direction into my feet. And it only takes a millisecond to break the pattern of it might be a different topic, but we're probably having the same argument that we've been having for a long time. So is there a way we can just break this? And then it's that little gap that gives you a chance then to bring that executive functioning kind of back online. And then we have an opportunity then to offer ourselves some compassion for the situation that we're in, and maybe to offer our partner some compassion, because we both feel very strongly in a particular topic, but there's other ways that we can engage that are healthier and setting a healthier example for our kids as well.
Sure.
That we can learn to emotionally regulate ourselves. But this is stuff that should be taught to kids in school. But we're trying to learn it as we're going through one of the biggest transitions of our adult lives, which is a bit insane to me. So I was like, let's start teaching some of this in kindergarten, and we'd have happier kids, happier parents, and it's just one more little tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, I typically, sorry, Nicole. No. I typically tell my clients, if there's been a stressful situation or an overwhelming or anger, whatever that is other than, neutral or love, that I tell them to take a couple of deep breaths. I love your idea of like, find my feet. Where are my feet? Where are my hands? Where are my, like just something. Yeah. And then I have them put their hands on their belly and take several deep breaths. And just say to the baby, everything's okay. I'm okay. You're okay. And I love you so much. Because the minute that you start even talking so you don't even have to talk good about yourself, compassion with yourself in that moment, because most people can find compassion for their baby very quickly in utero. Right. And because immediately by just saying, I love you, that triggers oxytocin in the brain. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. It just happens. Yeah. And so now your baby, instead of all those cortisols, level stress hormones, your baby is now being flooded instead with the oxytocin or love hormone. And so I think that and oftentimes just by doing that then centers yourself. Yeah. Right. Just because you're giving compassion to your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, if you're pregnant, even more so, you want to, shorten that interaction as much as possible. And it is, it is different. I think when you're actually pregnant because I think that is a really good example for dealing with any stressor when you're pregnant, that now, of course, we can't avoid all stress. We can't just go live on a tropical island somewhere, and nor would it be good for us if we did. Might sound like a good idea for short term anyway, but just recognizing that there's going to be other stressors in our lives as well, and that if we can kind of learn to respond to them a little bit differently and respond differently to our thoughts, and even just asking the question, is this thought helpful? Is a little way of segue into that little gap where you can kind of bring that brain back online and actually, behave in a way that we're proud of.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we, again, fail to teach our children or learn early enough is also like the way the emotions that we experience affect our body and the energetic component of it, right? So shame, fear, guilt, all these really heavy emotions, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, like live in our womb space and in our sacral chakra. So of course, if you're experiencing any of them through pregnancy, even through conception, through, birth and postpartum, like that is immediately going to be affected. So it's really interesting to see that we're almost taught the opposite, right? We're taught to dive into them so it affects us rather than to prevent and get it into, more of that safe space or more of that heart-centered, love-centered space.
And then for anyone, I guess, who's watching or listening to this as well, if this is the first time you're hearing about how our minds can impact our body and baby, the last thing we want to do is create any more stress for you. So really offer yourself some grace and compassion that this is new information that can be really helpful for you and your baby. And because when you do realize, when you kind of get into this, the biology of it, and realize that we are the architects of our baby's brain, that's a big deal that's on us, and it's so. Again, I don't want anyone watching this feeling shame or feeling bad about it. It's that whole saying, when we know better, we do better. And this is like years ago when we all thought smoking was fine, and it wasn't a big deal. And then we learned, the research came out, and we're seeing more and more of this in the research, that our mental health, our self-talk, how we manage stress has an impact on how our babies develop their own stress response. And if I've learned anything over the years, it's I would really like my kids to have a dissimilar stress response to the one I've had for most of my life. I want them having that healthy stress response, and it starts in pregnancy. It starts when we are growing their brains, and that's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Well,
let's talk about mindset and things that people can do leading up to their birth experience, and how, let's talk about things that are common, things that people might think going into labor that could really impact their experience, and how maybe they can turn some of those things around and have a different mindset, and why it's so important.
Well, I think first of all is to challenge any and all assumptions you have about your upcoming labor and birth. Because I know a lot of women come into, especially in the last kind of couple of weeks of, my sister and my mom and my aunt all had really long, awful, difficult labors, and they have kind of sentenced themselves to a very long, difficult labor. So I'd say right from the beginning of your pregnancy, challenge any assumptions that you have about birth and what anyone else has to say as well, because as in well, you don't really have big hips, or your bump is kind of small, and so challenging assumptions, asking again simple questions of is this thought helpful? Recognizing that for the most part, thoughts are not facts, that we don't have to believe everything we think. As Nicole be familiar with in the GentleBirth program, part of our kind of preparation, more so usually for the dads, more so than the moms, is the focus on sports psychology. And that idea of, mental focus, but mental focus is not something that you just decide to do when you're in labor, because everyone thinks, oh, I can focus. I have no problem focusing, especially if I've had my, cup of coffee in the morning and I'm feeling good. But we can, if you've never practiced mindfulness or really kind of focused attention for long periods, it's really hard to do when you're like having a stressful physical experience. So I think practicing throughout your pregnancy, that you're practicing where you give your attention to. And we have a kind of one of the golden rules of, asking yourself the question before you listen to a podcast, before you read something on Instagram, is what I'm about to read, discuss, or watch on TV now, is this going to make me more excited about my upcoming birth or more anxious? Because that just puts it back in mom's lap. So you control what you're being exposed to for the most part, and you decide how long you want to spend in that space where you're feeling this is not making me more excited. And I think anything that's not making you excited about your baby's birth, I would kind of move to the side.
Mm-hmm. So, but what about prepping for birth itself? Like, what are some of the things that they can do ahead of time from a mindset issue?
So do you mean like physically what they're going to experience in labor, or just like the mental kind of preparation?
Yeah, the mental thing that goes along with birth, right? Like, because I just think about how I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this, but like, so many women go into the birth experience already afraid of it, right? There's just a tremendous amount of fear going into it. And like, or there's people who are like, I'm going to just get an epidural. Like, that's it. That's my birth plan.
Yeah.
Right. But I often say, well, there's an optimal time to get an epidural. If you are going to get an epidural, hallelujah, do your thing. But understanding that there is an optimal time to get an epidural, and that's not until you're in active labor. So what are you going to do before then?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got to manage the early stages of labor. And especially if you're looking to avoid unnecessary interventions, right? Because a lot of times people will just go, as soon as contractions start, they have no idea how to manage any of it. And they haven't done any sort of training or thought processes or anything. And they go running to the hospital. And then now they're 1 or 2 centimeters dilated, maybe. And it's really early labor that may have lasted another couple of more days. But now you're in the hospital and you're on the clock, and they're not going to just let you lay there in labor. And because if you're not progressing quickly enough, they're going to just start doing all the things, right? The snowball of interventions is really powerful. So what are some of the things that they can do, especially towards the end of pregnancy, to really prepare their mind for what's coming?
One exercise that I do is and it's easier to do it, I guess, a little bit earlier on in pregnancy, because when I meet a couple, let's say for the first time, if I'm teaching them a class, and I want to understand kind of what their baseline is, of what do they see as their current strengths and resources, and what tools have they already got in their toolkit. And then after the class, and they've gone off and they've practiced with the app for a little bit, and they've taken, like, really got the grips with the information, I have them redo that exercise to show how much they've grown and how many tools they now have in their toolkit. Because if in the last couple of weeks for me, it's about winding down, because so many women, especially here in the US, get so little maternity leave, and they're working right up until they're about to go into labor. So trying to get them to wind down a bit, focus on resting, that they've got their birth preferences. Hopefully they have got a great OB, and they have chosen a place of birth that was a choice and wasn't, like, unfortunately due to kind of geography. But it's really about maintaining that kind of steadiness of, we're going to be really intentional about who we invite into this space to talk about our birth plans, lining up support for afterwards. But it's, for me, that the mindset process, it's not a, and I'm sure you agree, like, it's not a one and done thing. It's something that we're kind of, especially again, the earlier we meet these clients in their journey, the more we can kind of drip feed them, and they're starting to shift their own mindset in a healthier way. Because some people just have a really, growth mindset, flexible mindset, and you have the moms who want the epidural at 1 centimeter and then end up with birth trauma because they really didn't have a good understanding of what's involved. And that's really hard. Like, it's like, I can't believe, I think, Dawn, I think you're a while at this work as well, aren't you? You've been a while at this. I'm like, it's nearly coming up on nearly 20 years. I'm like, are we still talking about the fear of birth? Like, have we not just figured that out now, that it's a choice? You do not have to be afraid of birth, but you've got to do something with your mind to reduce that fear. Just like the assumption that we're still all walking around that it's normal to be afraid of labor. It's definitely to be normal to have, it's a new experience you've never been through before. You're testing your stamina, your focus. But for me, I'm like, oh, really? We're still talking about, well, there's so many great programs out there. Like, GentleBirth is one, but if GentleBirth is not for you, there's many other ways that you can train yourself, and because you're about to go through one of the most challenging physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually events of your life. Aren't you worth that investment?
Yeah.
So just to speak from my experience, and like I said, for my first birth, Tracy, I would say the GentleBirth app was my anchor, right? So talking about just anchoring in some kind of positive trigger.
Yes.
In those weeks, months, I was prepping for labor from like day one because I was terrified. But at that point in my life, I was commuting an hour to work. So yeah, it wasn't fun. But I would listen. You had one track in there was like car celebration.
Or the pregnancy celebration. Yes.
Pregnancy celebration. And I would listen to it in my car every morning on the way to work. And it was just like these amazing affirmations. I think it was about 30 minutes. So my hour commute was, was half of it. And as it got closer to birth, I might have just listened to it twice the whole time. Or, it was an anchor to then when early labor started. Immediately, I was like, put that on because I know it'll like get me in the zone, right?
Yeah.
Now, being a trainer of womb energetics and neurosomatics, I understand what I was doing, but back then I had no idea. But I tell my clients and my students, like, create these anchors, whether it be a smell, whether it be someone touching you in a certain spot, whether it be a sound or a track or music or anything. Get your body, because our body responds to the mind. So we all have anchors for everything in our life, right? If you hear a song on the radio that like brings you back to childhood or senior prom or something like that, or a smell that you whiff in the mall, it goes back to grandma's apple pie, or anything like that. We have them naturally occurring, but when we can be intentional about them, especially in this transitional process where we're like, okay, set these anchors so that when I need them, they immediately calm me. They immediately put me in the zone. I think that's really important. So I think that, like you said, GentleBirth is one amazing program. Again, I can vouch for it personally, but there are so many out there. And it doesn't even a lot of people are always like, another investment. I have all these expenses when it comes to my birth. And I will preach till I'm done preaching, like, invest in your birth every step of the way. But if you can't invest in one more thing, even just calm meditation music, or again, your partner like rubbing your shoulder, like have it done on repeat and getting you into a relaxed, calm state so that when birth is happening or labor is happening, it can be that anchor for you.
Well, and be clear that stress and fear causes more pain.
Yeah.
Period. If you are stressed, I talk about this as a doula, in the early stages of labor. It's really common for women when they start getting those intense labor pains to be like, oh God, tensing up and holding everything close and like, oh my God. Well, guess what? That is doubling your pain. Period.
Yeah.
Because your body is trying to go open and you are trying to close it back up. So you're quite literally fighting against the rhythm of your body by doing that. And so I used hypnosis with my last two. I did hypnobirthing, which I swear by because I'm a super type A personality. And that means I overthink everything. I stay right here in my brain all the time. And I really needed something to teach me how to relax because I had no idea how to do that. I did not know what relaxation was. And meditation was huge. Meditation and hypnosis. And a lot of people think like woo-woo stuff. Like it's not hypnosis in like a
stable performance.
Yeah, like I'm going to go bark like a dog if someone tells me. Like, it's not like that. It's really just an ultimate state of relaxation so that you can join your brain and your body together so that they can work together instead of on opposite ends. And it really just brings you into alignment. At least that's the way I saw it. And it helped me just focus on like taking that deep breath and just imagining my body and what it's going through and what it is that I can do to help it.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the kind of thing that I was talking about when I was asking you, like, what are some of the things? And I'm talking like, I want somebody who's listening right now, they could just take away one thing. And that is that figuring out how to get into that deep relaxation and focus. And you can't just do that when you go into labor. It's something you have to learn how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so investing in that time, there's lots of free options out there if you can't afford to pay for a more in-depth program. There's lots of things. And I think like what Nicole said, find one that you just love, that you just listen to these sounds and it really registers with you. And then just listen to that one over and over. You don't have to listen to a whole bunch of different ones. It's just teaching your body how to get there. And you should be doing that long before you go into labor.
Absolutely. And it's not something that you can. Now, in saying that, over the years, I have met the odd kind of couple of women who've like literally found GentleBirth at like 38 weeks or 39 weeks, and they barely got anything, but it was enough just to make it a better experience for them. But then they come back, they say, well, I wish I'd started sooner, because if I only used it for 2 weeks and this is the result, well, if I'd been doing it for a couple of months, it would have been completely different.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect though, I think, the affordability and everything. I mean, we just made the GentleBirth app is free, and the class that's in the app is free to anyone who's on Medicaid. So all they have to do is put in their Medicaid number and the app is free to them.
But I love that.
There is also this idea that, I'll just learn it on YouTube and I'll apply it on the day. And I'm like, so yeah, if you're listening today, you want to say, don't get your childbirth ed from YouTube.
Oh God, please don't.
No. And really, when you're looking at that aspect of childbirth ed, it's all the physical end of it. It's when can I get an epidural, a comfort measure for back labor, when do I go to the hospital? And that's important information that you could get on any website. Anywhere. But the mental, emotional aspect of it is just so huge. And it's just so disappointing that, the medical model just really hasn't recognized how influential the mind is on the body and progress of labor and mom's mental health and all of that as well. So it's, find something, even if it's, play a YouTube video that's sounds of the ocean and and try to let yourself relax, because a lot of the women that I work with, as you said, do not know how to relax. They know how because they're working, 12-hour days. They're coming home, they're getting a bit of dinner, they're falling into bed, passing out, thinking that is relaxation. When it's like
not at all the same.
No.
Relaxing on the couch is not at all the same as relaxation in the brain. And I think that is probably the most critically important thing that you said here today, Tracy.
Yes.
Is they are two very different things. And you need to teach yourself how to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like when I had my first baby, I was just excited. I was clueless.
Okay.
And I was just like, I'm just going to go have a baby because that's what everybody does. It's just a normal process. Like, I did not know. I did take the childbirth education class, which in the end I thought was totally worthless, by the way, and actually said that as they're cutting me open on the OR table. I actually said that to my husband. I go, well, that class was totally useless. By the time I had my third and fourth baby, who I had at home, had very different experiences, VBAC, all of those things. I was a birth doula by then and had been for many years. And I was ecstatic and so excited to go into labor. I looked forward to it. Mm-hmm. It was a challenge. I had such a different mindset. I was utterly prepared. It was so empowering, even though I do not have easy labors. It doesn't matter how much hypnosis I use. I do not. But I just still felt so empowered, even though it was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life.
And that's the difference.
Right. It is the difference.
It can be a hard labor. It can be a really rough, challenging, but where your mind is will make such a difference in how you process.
Yeah.
That experience.
And how you end up feeling about your birth experience, even if it was hard, even if it was traumatic, quote unquote. The way your mindset can change everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So, Tracy, speaking of the village, besides being a midwife and a doula, what do you think, or who do you think is the most important role in the village for a woman?
I do want to say midwife, but that's coming back to, because I guess when we look at the kind of the older idea of the midwife, who was really a part of the community, was part of preconception care. The woman's whole reproductive life midwifery was intertwined with that. So I would say the midwife, but I guess, these days, advocates and, the wisdom comes in many different forms. So I think whoever in the village is that I guess the wise woman of the village,
the guide, right?
Guide. Who is that wise woman of your village to seek them out? And these days they are doulas, they are childbirth educators, they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community for parents. So I think find that wise woman of the village, whoever that is for you. And we all have them. We just have to kind of seek them out, and doulas will usually lead you towards them if they're not them themselves.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. And all the information about your app will be in the show notes, and any way that they can contact you if they have any further questions.
Yeah, they can reach out to me at Tracy@gentlebirth.com. They'll find me online. I'm usually Unfortunately, online quite a bit. But yeah, happy to help. If anyone has any questions, please reach out. And now that we do have this available now on Medicaid, I think we want to see lots of moms using this and lots of moms having the benefit of having kind of this kind of education as well as whatever else they're finding on YouTube.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for joining us on Speaking of the Village. If you loved today's episode, make sure to hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
And remember, you're not alone. We're here, we're listening, and we're all in this together because in our village, no mom walks alone.
I would say